My name is Norma. Sitting here in my peaceful apartment, sunlight streaming through the windows, it's hard to believe what I've been through. 6 months ago, I was in a courtroom, facing off against my own family in a legal battle that would change my life forever. The courtroom was tense, filled with the weight of betrayal and lies. My parents, Arthur and Vivian, sat at the plaintiff's table, their faces cold and determined. My sister, Iris, sat beside them, her eyes red-rimmed and her expression pious. They were trying to sue me for $682,000 for a house I never agreed to buy. As I sat there, waiting for the judge to begin, I couldn't help but think back to how it all started. Growing up in the Thompson household, there was no doubt about who the favorite child was. Iris was the life of the party, always charming and outgoing. She could make anyone laugh with her jokes and her infectious personality. Teachers adore her, and neighbors always had kind words to say about her. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, more interested in numbers and books than in socializing. I spent my free time poring over textbooks and studying for exams, determined to get good grades and make something of myself. When I passed my accounting exam at 25, I thought my parents would be proud. Instead, my father asked me when I was going to get married and start having kids, just like Iris. Iris had gotten married at 22 and already had 2 children by the time she was 26. My parents had been more than happy to help them out financially, paying for their rent and other expenses without a second thought. When I graduated from college with student loans, I paid them off on my own with no help from anyone. Over the years, I started to realize that I could never measure up to Iris in my parents' eyes. No matter how hard I worked or how many achievements I had, they always seemed to favor her. It was like I was living in her shadow, constantly being compared to her and coming up short. Things came to a head 3 years ago when Iris called me asking for $15,000. She said she needed it to buy a new car because her old one had broken down. She promised to pay me back within 6 months, but I knew better. She still owed me $8,000 from the last time she'd asked for money, and I'd never seen a dime of it. I told her no, and she got angry. She said I was being selfish and that I didn't care about her or her family. That night, my mother called me crying, telling me that I was being cold and heartless. She said that family was supposed to stick together and that I should be willing to help Iris out. I tried to explain to her that I had my own financial responsibilities and that I couldn't just give money away willy-nilly. But she wouldn't listen. She just kept telling me that I was wrong and that I needed to change my attitude. A few months later, Iris asked me to co-sign her apartment lease. She said that the landlord wanted a guarantor and that her credit wasn't good enough. I told her no again, explaining that co-signing meant that I would be responsible if she defaulted on the lease. She got angry again, and this time my father joined in. He said that I was being ungrateful and that I owed it to my sister to help her out. He refused to speak to me for 3 weeks, giving me the cold shoulder every chance he got. Then one day, I received a letter in the mail from a bank. It was a second notice for a mortgage payment that was overdue. I was confused because I had never taken out a mortgage. I looked at the property address, and it was for a house in the suburbs that I had never heard of. I called the bank immediately, and they told me that I was listed as a co-signer on the mortgage. I was shocked. I had never signed anything, and I had no idea how my name had gotten on the mortgage. I called my mother and demanded an explanation. She was evasive at first, but eventually, she admitted that she and my father had put my name on the mortgage without my knowledge or consent. They said that Iris needed the house for her family and that they had decided that I should help pay for it. I was furious. I told them that they had committed fraud and that I would not be responsible for the mortgage. They didn't seem to care. They said that family was more important than the law and that I should be willing to do whatever it took to help my sister. They threatened to sue me if I didn't agree to pay the mortgage, and they even went so far as to enlist Iris as a witness against me. They claimed that I had made a verbal promise at a family dinner 2 years ago to help with the mortgage, but I knew that was a lie. I had never promised anything of the sort. I knew that I needed to fight back. I called my friend Leo, who was a lawyer. He agreed to take my case, and he started gathering evidence to prove that I had been the victim of fraud. He found emails and text messages that showed that Iris had been trying to add me to the mortgage application without my knowledge. He also found evidence that the notary who had certified my signature had been a friend of my father's and that he had not followed proper protocols. As the trial approached, my family tried to turn the public against me. Iris posted a long, emotional message on social media, claiming that I was a selfish and heartless person who was willing to let her and her family lose their home. Her message got a lot of attention, and many of our friends and relatives started to side with her. They called me names and told me that I was a terrible person. I was hurt and angry, but I refused to let their words get to me. I knew that I was in the right, and I was determined to prove it. On the day of the trial, I arrived at the courthouse early, dressed in a suit and looking professional. Leo met me in the hallway, and he told me to stay calm and focused. When the trial started, my family's lawyer began by presenting their case. He claimed that I had made a verbal promise to help with the mortgage and that I had reneged on my promise. He called Iris to the stand, and she testified that I had nodded when my mother mentioned the mortgage at a family dinner 2 years ago. She said that in our family, a nod was as good as a signature. I listened to her testimony with disbelief. I couldn't believe that she would lie under oath, especially to help my parents. But I knew that I had to stay calm and let Leo do his job. When it was Leo's turn to cross-examine Iris, he began by asking her about the emails and text messages that he had found. She tried to deny that she had sent them, but Leo had copies of the messages, and he was able to prove that she was lying. He also asked her about the notary who had certified my signature, and she had no answer. Next, Leo called me to the stand. I took a deep breath and walked up to the witness box. I looked out at the courtroom and saw my family sitting there, their faces cold and angry. I felt a moment of fear, but I pushed it aside. I knew that I had to tell the truth. Leo asked me about the mortgage, and I explained that I had never signed anything and that I had no idea how my name had gotten on the mortgage. I also told him about the times that Iris had asked me for money and to co-sign her lease, and how I had refused. I showed the court the emails and text messages that I had saved, and I explained how they proved that I had been the victim of fraud. When Leo was finished questioning me, the judge took a recess. I sat there in the courtroom, waiting for the judge to return. I was nervous and afraid, but I also felt a sense of hope. I knew that Leo had done a good job presenting my case, and I was confident that the judge would see the truth. When the judge returned, she began by summarizing the evidence that had been presented. She said that the evidence showed that I had not made a verbal promise to help with the mortgage, and that my name had been added to the mortgage without my knowledge or consent. She also said that the notary who had certified my signature had not followed proper protocols, and that his actions had been a violation of the law. Then, the judge made her decision. She dismissed the case with prejudice, meaning that my family could not bring the same case against me again. She also referred the mortgage documents and related emails to the district attorney's office for review of potential fraud charges. I was overjoyed. I couldn't believe that I had won. I looked over at my family, and I saw the shock and anger on their faces. They had thought that they could use the law to force me to pay for a house I never wanted, but they had been wrong. After the trial, I spoke to Leo. He told me that I had done a great job in court and that he was proud of me. He also said that he was going to file a counterclaim against my family for identity fraud, forgery, and damages to my credit and professional reputation. Over the next few months, the pieces fell into place. The bank completed its investigation and found that the loan officer who had processed the mortgage application had violated multiple compliance protocols. He was fired, and the notary who had certified my signature had his license revoked. My name was officially removed from the mortgage, and my credit score began to recover. The district attorney's office reviewed the fraud referral, but they decided not to pursue criminal charges. They said that it was a family matter and that there was no intent to defraud the bank itself. However, my father and Iris both received civil penalties and formal warnings. My counterclaim against my family settled out of court. They agreed to pay my legal fees in full, $23,000.
It wasn't about the money, though.
It was about accountability. I wanted them to know that they couldn't just do whatever they wanted and get away with it. The trial had a profound impact on my family. Iris and her husband separated a few months later, and she moved out of the house. My parents had to sell the house because they couldn't afford the mortgage payments on their own. They downsized to a small apartment in a different part of town. I know that some people might think that I was being too harsh on my family. They might say that family is supposed to stick together, no matter what. But I believe that there comes a point when you have to stand up for yourself and your rights. I couldn't let my family use me as a means to an end. I had to fight for what was right, even if it meant going against them. Looking back, I realized that the trial was a turning point in my life. It taught me the importance of standing up for myself, of not letting others take advantage of me. It also taught me the value of true friends and the importance of having a support system. I've made some changes in my life since the trial. I've started seeing a therapist to help me deal with the emotional aftermath of what happened. I've also changed my last name to my mother's maiden name, Parker. It was a small act of reclamation, a way of saying that I'm still connected to my family, but that I'm also my own person. I've also made some new friends, people who appreciate me for who I am and who don't try to take advantage of me. I've learned to set boundaries and to say no when I need to. And I've learned to trust my instincts and to follow my own path, even if it means going against the grain. Life isn't perfect, but I'm happy. I have a good job, a small apartment that I love, and a few close friends. I'm finally free from the burden of my family's expectations, and I'm able to live my life on my own terms. If you're ever in a situation where you're being taken advantage of by your family or someone else, I want you to know that you're not alone. It's not easy to stand up for yourself, but it's important. You deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, and you have the right to say no. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're the bad guy for standing up for what's right. So, that's my story. It's not a happy ending, but it's a beginning. I'm still healing, but I'm getting there. And I'm grateful for every lesson I've learned along the way.